Oh look, the Master. How shocking. Welcome to the Time Treadmill. I'm Ron, and these are my sweaty thoughts about Doctor Who. Look, I know it's kind of the Master's thing to impersonate other people and be a master of disguise and then be revealed to be the Master at a climactic moment, but the final beat of Part 2 of Time Flight is exactly the same as the beat in Castrovalva earlier this season, where a character credited under an anagram of Anthony Ainley turns out to be the Master. And it's just boring and repetitive this close together. But then, that's Time Flight for you. The paradoxical thing about Time Flight is that in terms of raw viewing numbers, Part 1 of Time Flight is the single highest viewed episode of the John Nathan Turner era. It's the highest viewing for all of the 80s, which of course means by extension everything goes downhill from here. And in terms of viewership, Time Flight is noteworthy as being the exact opposite of The Visitation earlier this season. The Visitation is one of the few stories that gained viewers week after week and finished with significantly more viewers than it began. With Time Flight, the opposite happens. The story sheds viewers every episode up until the end, losing millions of viewers by the end of the story. And frankly, one of the reasons the first episode had its high viewership was because of the shocking ending of the previous story. However I may feel about Adric, the fact that Doctor Who killed off a companion sent shockwaves through the viewing community. That hadn't happened since poor doomed Katarina way back in the first Doctor era. It had literally been decades since that had happened. And so people tuned in following Earthshock with the notion that, hey, look, maybe Doctor Who has gotten really interesting now. And they got, instead, Time Flight. The only story that I can think of in Doctor Who history to use aggressive and pervasive product placement. The entire story happened because a couple of key players in the Doctor Who ecosystem were invited to Heathrow, which was newly opened, and it was also the London home of the Concorde, which I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but back in the early 80s, the Concorde was a huge publicity machine. It was a breakthrough in air travel that was going to revolutionize transcontinental travel. Of course, that didn't work out because the number of passengers that could be packed in couldn't support the cost of the ship. But still, the Concorde at the time was a remarkable and highly attention-grabbing piece of aircraft. And so a story was crafted to feature Heathrow and the Concorde to bring viewers to Doctor Who, to the point where British Airways got veto power on elements of the script. Literally, character names were changed because they happened to have the last name of people who were actual British Airways employees. And plot elements were adjusted when British Airways objected to particular bits and pieces, mostly technical things. But the payoff for that was that the BBC and Doctor Who was the first program to be given clearance to film at Heathrow Airport, and Doctor Who got to film around and inside an actual Concorde. In fact, the one they filmed in was the flagship Concorde aircraft of the British Airways fleet. So all of that is well and good. Unfortunately, by this point in the season, and with everything that was taken to secure that access, almost no budget was left for special effects. And so we get this story in which a pair of Concordes are taken down a time curve 140 million years in the past for some mysterious reason. And it looks like a really bad set. Everything about this production looks cheap and tawdry, and the product placement is in your face and awful. And unfortunately, I can't help but compare it to the other Doctor Who story that's set in and around an airport and on aircraft. That, of course, being the Faceless Ones in the second Doctor era. The Faceless Ones easily ranks in my top 10 favorite Doctor Who stories of all time. It is a phenomenal story and uses its location and hardware spectacularly as compared to Time Flight, which is just miserable. In the course of this ridiculous project, I have oftentimes said in reference to a subpar story, but it's no Planet of Giants. In this case, Time Flight pretty much is a planet of giants. To the point where a few years ago, when Doctor Who magazine did a poll to rank the first 200 stories in Doctor Who, Time Flight came in at number 197, and deservedly so. And unfortunately, I still have one more day of viewing on this story, so come back tomorrow and I will shit on it some more. I'll see you then.